had to lock all the doors, otherwise he'd be out. He would climb through windows if he could, because he was suddenly wanted to go and see his mother, you know, who had been dead for years, or, yeah, it just very, very hard. And if you've got somebody who is active and quite strong, it's very hard as a carer to stop them going out.
Usually something from the long-term memory would be better because it's in a different part of the brain than the short-term memory. So even just coming up with a story of something that happened, like I remember when I used to visit my grandma every single summer, and she always used to make us blueberries and cream, and I had so much fun doing that. And sometimes if you can direct them to something else, like a story like that, where that's where they're comfortable at in their long-term memory.
Right, I'm going to say hello to everybody and welcome to this Unpacking Dementia session. In this Facebook Live series, we're going to be exploring sundowning. So for those of you who have joined us before, you'll know a little bit about how these work and who I am. But for those of you who haven't, I'm Ruth and I am the lead for our dementia support services here at Dementia Adventure. Now, today we're going to be talking about something that many caregivers find exceptionally challenging, which is sundowning, but it's also known as early evening agitation. I'm really, really pleased to be joined by two incredibly special guests today. So I've got dementia carer Jean, who has cared for a family member and her husband living with dementia. And I have got an expert in the field, Joanne Lafleur. So I'm going to ask Jean to start. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Jean Haste. My husband had dementia and Parkinson's, so I was a carer for many years, but we went on lots of dementia adventure holidays, which was brilliant. So after my husband passed away, I am now a volunteer on the dementia adventure holidays. Plus, I run a group for the carers of people with dementia. So we just get together and we talk things like this, sundowning, you know, all the different aspects. And when you've been through it, you can pass that knowledge on to others. So
absolutely. We're really, really pleased to have you with us because it's such a rounded viewpoint you bring today. So thank you so much for joining us. And we've got Joanne Lafleur as well, all the way from Michigan. So Joanne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I've been doing dementia care a little over 20 years, and I had worked in communities, I've worked in home care, I've worked in all the sectors. I also owned my own home care specializing in dementia and 3 memory care homes. Now I also do content and I put out little videos, 1 to 3 minute videos all over on all the socials, and I directly support caregivers that are caring for someone at home with dementia.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. So just before we start, a little bit of sundowning. Oh, blimey. A little bit of housekeeping. Please do ask any questions that you've got in the chat. Now, if we're not able to address them throughout the session, we will come back to you, I promise. And as always, I'd really like to do a quick shout out to Right at Home, who have very kindly sponsored our Unpacking Dementia series. So let's start with the basics, because I think sundowning is a term that, you know, some of us know, but actually not everybody knows. So Joanne, would you mind explaining what is sundowning?
So sundowning is essentially difficulty with mental, emotional, and physical abilities later in the evening. So I like to talk about it like the spoon theory, if you've ever heard of that. So basically, it's like every morning, people with dementia, we all wake up with a certain amount of spoons. And what we do is everything that we do throughout the day, whether it's get up, walk to the bathroom, get dressed, eat dinner, or eat breakfast, walk again to the bathroom, then go do an activity, it takes a spoon. So if you wake up in the morning and you have 7 spoons and you just did all of those things, you might only have 1 or 2 spoons left by, say, like 2, 3 o'clock. And so essentially you're struggling with being able to handle any kind of extra stimulation, or they just tend to have a lot more anger or frustration or agitation or anxiety, sometimes more hallucinations and delusions. And also physical abilities can be limited. So like where I've seen people that in the morning time, they can feed themselves and they can walk, but in the afternoon time, they need more assistance and they need a wheelchair. because it can really vary depending on how many spoons they have left, right?
Sure. And I think one of the questions that has come in straight away, and we're often asked about when we work in the dementia field, is how do we tell the difference between sundowning and those other causes of agitation?
I mean, ultimately, agitation is fixed by lots of different things, and whether it's agitation from sundowning or agitating from the outside stimulus, it just depends. What you want to do is anytime your person is having like agitation or anxiety, you want to see what happened before that.
Mhm.
Is it an event that happened before? Are there a lot of people in the house? Did the music get too loud? Are they hungry? So a lot of those things can happen also, and then there's sundowning too. So it ultimately it doesn't really matter because some of the strategies are the same.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. And I think really for me, sundowning is it's about that time of day. It is literally that when the sun starts to go out, when it's that evening time, and it's that like lack of recognition that the sun, we're changing from daytime to evening that can create those real problems.
Mm.
Um, and so, Gina, I'm going to ask you here to come in. Like when you've been working with carers and supporting people living with dementia, what is it that you've seen? Like, what is that direct behaviour that you've seen that's made you go, actually, this is sundowning?
It is somebody who can be quite placid in the day. When it comes to the evening, they seem to come alive.
Mm.
A good friend of mine, her husband had it really badly, and she had to lock all the doors, otherwise he'd be out. He would climb through windows if he could, because he was suddenly wanted to go and see his mother, who had been
Mhm.
dead for years, or yeah, it's just very, very hard. And if you've got somebody who is active and quite strong, it's very hard as a carer to stop them going out. In the
Yeah.
end, she used to open the door and let him out and follow him up the road. And after, I don't know, 10 minutes, she would go up to him and say, "Oh, fancy seeing you here. Do you fancy a cup of coffee, tea, glass of wine?" And he would turn around and then go back home. But if she didn't let him out, yeah, he would,
Yeah.
just break the window or something to get out.
And I think
It's,
actually we're seeing that in the comments coming through that actually sometimes a short walk can just
yes.
help to regulate somebody or to calm somebody down. And, it breaks that friction because I think ultimately when we're talking about early evening, it's very easy to sit in the forum that we are today, but it is exhausting,
Mm,
absolutely exhausting. And Joanne, what do you advise carers when, by the evening they're exhausted and they're then having to cope with this
mm,
kind of behavior?
Well, I think the thing is a lot of times during this time frame, our people don't necessarily need a lot of words or a lot of action. What they need is comfort. And so what I suggest is actually getting some items that's going to comfort them, a few different activity things like a soft blanket. I like to have a warming pack that's with lavender lotion. I have a whole Amazon store full of stuff that can work for that. But a lot of times they just need you to sit quietly with them, and direct
Okay.
them to something else or just comfort them because their feelings are really overwhelming for them.
Okay. And Jean, I could see you
mm.
maybe thinking a little bit
I definitely
differently.
don't think that. Sorry, I shouldn't go,
Okay,
but
No,
that's
no,
okay.
I
that's
don't think
fine.
that would have worked with this particular man because
Mm.
if she didn't go for a walk, she was getting in the car and taking for a drive because he was looking for his mother,
Right.
Yeah.
or he thought he wanted to go home. He didn't realize he was home already. So I think sitting him down I don't think it would have worked.
I think
Uh,
ultimately what we're seeing here is that because everybody's journey is so individual and
yeah,
everybody's experience is just that, I think ultimately what we're really talking about is a distraction.
yeah,
It is that
yeah.
distraction from now, whether that distraction is calming somebody, because I have seen that work very, very well, that, hand massage, like essential oils, being really successful. Equally, like, we've had comments already that actually going for that walk, just getting out that distraction and oh, it's time to come back in now can be equally as successful. So I guess really there's probably no rights and wrongs with the types of support, but there's definitely different, options and ideas that can help somebody. Would you agree, Joanne?
Definitely. And like one technique is not going to work for all. We're all different and human.
Mm,
And especially with the frontotemporal type of dementia, they need walks. That's the number one best thing for them is pacing and walking because it reduces a ton of anxiety. But whatever your person is into or needs, come up with a strategy that says, when this happens, I have three things I'm going to do. And it's
mm,
going to be trying this, or this, because I know you know your person the best, right? So you know what they need, and you just have those things handy and pull them in, or say every day at about 4 p.m. we're going to take a walk before dinner or something.
So I think really it's about, having it's having almost like a plan, isn't it?
mm,
And I think
That's it.
sometimes that plan might not work, and that's okay. But actually, what it does do is it empowers us as carers to actually have an idea. Because I think ultimately, what I hear time and time again is people feeling so helpless, people feeling like, I just don't know what to do.
mm.
And, there are lots of different things we can try. And I think the biggest message I like to get over to people is that there is no right and wrong. You might try something one day and it works. And actually, if going for a walk around the block every single day and that's what you do and that works,
Mm.
absolutely do that. But if that's not right for you, there are different things out there. And then maybe we move to the sitting down, the calming down, the reduction of noise and sensory overload in the evening. So yeah, it's finding that plan, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I really wanted to address, and I think, Jean, you're probably the best person to answer this here, is that because caring can be so demanding, it's that additional pressure, isn't it?
Mm.
And the impact that puts on carers. And what is it you see, like when you're doing those carers groups, that really sort of highlights how challenging this is for you?
I think by the time the end of the day comes, you are absolutely shattered anyway. You've been answering the same questions 100 times in the day, and then suddenly you've got this extra walking around, or just so agitated that it is, yeah, it's very, very hard on carers. Yeah, yeah.
It is. And I think, Joanne, one of the things I'd really love to ask you is, we, like I'm sure yourself in the States, have lots of people who are caring for people from afar. I found myself in that position. What do you do then? Because we've talked about those strategies where we're living with somebody, or, we are able to go out for a walk, but actually when we're sort of miles away, how can we support somebody then?
So usually they're going to be getting on the phone and calling you like 25 times around that time, right? So the best thing that you can do is come up with a strategy of what is comforting to them to say. So it might be like um usually something from the long-term memory would be better because it's in a different part of the brain than the short-term memory. So even
Mm.
just coming up with a story of something that happened, like I remember when I used to visit my grandma every single summer, and she always used to make us blueberries and cream, and I had so much fun doing that. And sometimes if you can direct them to something else, like a story like that, where that's where they're comfortable at in their long-term memory, it can reduce it. But also I tell caregivers, you don't have to answer every phone call. You don't have to.
Hmm.
Like, but at this point in time, if they're having a lot of sundowning or other issues, then they probably need more assistance than they're being having too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I did a lovely piece of work with a couple a little while ago, and actually it was about looking at photo albums, reminiscing and talking
Yes.
about those times. Because like you say, it is that different part of the brain and seeing where the conversation goes.
Yeah,
Sometimes we learn things about family members. We've known these people all of our lives, but actually there's always a learning to be done. But it
definitely.
can be quite soothing. And I think there's often that fear that might encourage somebody to feel like that's where they're at. But actually what we can do with those photo albums is almost see that life journey as well, can't we? And make something that supports that. Jean, is that something that you've done with your carers, and you've seen work at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I did it with my husband. Having photograph albums and things like that, and the dementia adventure books, the holiday books
Mm.
are absolutely fantastic. I've got a stack of them,
Mhm.
and we would just go through those over and over again because every time you open one up, he'd forgotten what seen anyway. So, but yeah, yeah, definitely going back in
Yeah.
time, and also having a book about their life. So if
Yeah.
you're not around, like my husband ended up in a care home, so at least the carers then would have the book to go through him with, and with the names of everybody underneath and everything, so they could talk to him about it. Definitely
Yeah.
have photographs and things. Brilliant. Yeah.
And just, I'm going to move on to the why does it happen. Now, we know it's not something that's diagnosed. We also know that it's something that's acknowledged by, people who are work within the dementia field. So let's have a little think about why that might be. Joanne, I know, like you've talked about the spoon analogy, haven't you? And that being, a real indication that that's what somebody could be. But do you think things like unmet needs and lack of routine or meaning and purpose to a day can also impact that?
Definitely, definitely. We're all affected by our environment and the things that happen. So the other thing I want to mention too is like we need to know how to handle those questions that come up in the evening time, which is I want to go home and where's my person that's not no longer living, right? So we
Yeah.
if you answer those correctly that and bring peace, then those behaviors will reduce too. But
Mm.
yeah, I think it happens in every type of dementia and in different stages. It's not always just one stage. You see it worse as the stages develop as they're later in the illness.
Yeah.
But it's not really diagnosable because it's, I mean, it's not a diagnosis, first of all, it's just dementia. But um, then the
It is
other,
like a series of behaviors, isn't it? And I think it's a
yes,
recognition that actually that behavior pattern might change at that
yes,
particular day. So yeah, it is absolutely recognized, but I agree, it's not something your GP would diagnose but that's
Mm.
not to say there isn't support out there as well, with this. So we've talked about some strategies, haven't we? But there's certainly for some dementias, there might be medication that can help, and conversations with a medical practitioner can be
Mm.
valuable for sure. Would you agree?
definitely. I mean, what sometimes if what we're doing is not working as far as redirection and we have to add a medication, then what we would do is give that like 1 hour before we know that they're usually having it. So,
Yeah.
we might give it at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
before it even starts. I think that's really the key is you
Mm.
wanna you wanna try to handle it before it starts or have a plan
Yeah.
because once it starts, you're both exhausted, you're both stressed, you're both anxious about it, and that just makes the situation worse.
Mm.
And I can see, Jean, you're nodding
Mm.
along there in
I
absolute
agree
agreement.
definitely with that. I've got people I know that actually put on outside lights, spotlights in the garden,
Mm,
put fairy lights up in the garden, more so in the winter because it gets darker early.
mm.
Um, yeah, just so that they,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have equally worked with people who in summer are still shutting their curtains at 5 o'clock because it is that routine. And if that doesn't happen, their
Mm.
learning was that exacerbates that sundowning for the
Yeah.
person they support. So, routine can be really, really important. And I think
Mm.
sometimes people feel like when you have that strict routine, that can disable you from going and, still maybe going away and enjoying yourself, but actually the reality is we can still take that routine with us, and that can be just as valuable to provide other opportunities and meaning and purpose still, which will in turn hopefully help to reduce some of those symptoms you might see.
Mm.
Definitely. So yeah, and I think we've had a really lovely comment from Chris here, and this is something I certainly agree with. It's absolutely about validation rather
It
than
is
correcting,
100%.
Mm.
It has to be.
and
Yeah.
and it's hard, isn't it, with a family member not to correct? We don't suddenly see a big label that says this is sundowning. I need validation. It's like you say, we're often at the end of our like tethers. We've had a long day. We've got lots of things going on, but that validation rather than correction, when we take that deep breath and are able to do that, can be game changing for sure. And just
Yes.
accepting that being with somebody can sometimes just be enough, or, going for that walk, or just, like the strategies that we've talked, certainly. Yeah.
And a
Mm.
Um,
lot of times if you meet their need, what the need if you try to listen beyond what they're actually saying, I want my mother or I want to go home, what they're asking for is comfort. I don't feel comfortable. I don't know my surroundings right now. And we all would say the same thing when we're struggling and we don't feel that good or we're anxious or we're somewhere we don't really know about, we want to go home. And who doesn't want their mom when they're not feeling good, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from, certainly a professional side of things, we know that dementia is an ever-changing condition. We know it is not straightforward and there is chemical fluctuations throughout the brain. And I think we often talk here about the bookcase analogy, that actually I'm able to access my bookcase all the time sometimes, and that's great. So that bookcase, that memory that I created earlier is there. But actually, I might not be able to access that later in the day. And, my brain is taking me to when I was 40, when I was 14 even. And that's the bookcase that that's the book that I can access. And I think when that happens, we see that different reality, don't we? And it's really, really hard to know how to support somebody with that. But again, we often feel like I'm often asked, should I just lie to the person I'm supporting? And it's not necessarily that lie, it's that validation, that like, and that distraction. Okay, tell me about it. And maybe that photo album. Okay, show me where's home.
Mm,
I've worked with many, many families where there's like lots of photos of house. Sometimes you're going back to that childhood home. Other times you might be going back to somebody where their children are little again. But
Mhm.
by going back to that and exploring that, oh, tell me about it. What did you enjoy around that time? Where were you working at that point? And just distracting those
mm,
conversations round can really,
yeah.
really help. Keep the situation calmer for yourselves, but certainly for that person you're supporting. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Mm.
We've got a question about clocks. So do you think is this something that can help? I've not seen this practically out and about, but can, having acknowledgement of the time be helpful for people?
I've seen it be helpful in someone that like their sundowning starts when they were like, I want dinner, when's dinner? And then I want to go to bed. If they're trying to like say, I need this, when is this happening? When is this happening? When is this happening? Then I've seen an alarm clock that has the digital numbers on it, not like the hands, but a
Hmm.
digital clock so that you can then point to it and say, okay, it isn't 5 o'clock yet, it's only 3 o'clock. And in 2 more hours, we're gonna have dinner. And sometimes that can help calm them down because they see something visual with it.
Yeah. And Jane, have you seen that as well? Is that something you recommend for your carers?
I suppose we always had a clock, but I don't ever. But then my husband didn't have it. Do you know what I mean? I've been in care homes, and when it gets to what I call the sundowning hour,
Mm,
half of the people come alive and they've been sitting all day.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very tough for the carers in care homes as well
Yeah.
because everybody gets. The main thing is, I think, is to have their main meal at lunchtime so that they have actually eaten. So if they get agitated and don't want to sit down to eat, you could give them a piece of sandwich or something, and they can walk round with it.
Yeah.
Because they just turn into what I call not different people, but they just change. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm,
Yeah, definitely. And we've had a question come in about can improving light levels help?
I haven't seen light as an issue. I really see it more as a capacity issue that they've reached their capacity and they don't have anything left to give. So that's not something we ever did. We really just tried to address the unmet need, the physical needs, and then try to
Yeah.
redirect. Once we fix whatever they're worried about, then we redirect.
I mean, I think from certainly my perspective and the work that I've done, we know that by getting outdoors, it can be a very natural therapy. You get lots of
Yes,
hormonal changes in the brain, lots of natural chemical brain changes. I think Jean will probably nod that we really do see very clearly how people eat and sleep better when they're away on holiday, but we are busy. So, and we are
yeah.
definitely outdoors more. I've not seen any research that light levels would make a difference for sure, but I think getting out and, having that engagement outdoors is beneficial for all of us,
definitely.
It provides us in that care capacity as a break,
Yeah,
but it really provides, natural, almost entertainment as well for somebody living with dementia at any stage. So, we on our carer session always talk about, even if getting out of that door is too much, take that cup of tea into the garden, look at the birds, there's always something to see. And although that's not a specific light levels will make the difference, I think it does create a meaning and a purpose and a distraction. Would you agree with
Mm,
that?
any change in location can change the situation completely. Whether
Yeah.
they normally sit in the living room, so you bring them into the, over by the window where the kitchen is so they can watch the birds, or they're in their room a lot, so you bring them to the living room, or they're inside a lot, so you bring them outside. But I've seen
Yeah.
that make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's been such an interesting topic to talk about, and I could honestly stay here all day. But what I absolutely want to make an acknowledgement to is, we did briefly talk about getting external support from a GP. And I think what's really, really key to understand is that if there's any thoughts about medication, that is not something we would discuss here. And we would absolutely recommend, if you are struggling with those changes, if you are noticing changes, do reach out, seek support from a GP or the Admiral Nurse Service, which we will provide a link for at the end of today's session, because those are the people that are qualified. What we are here to do today is really just unpick, what does sundowning look like? How can it feel? What are some of those strategies that we can try when we're at home? But I think when it becomes more than that, and there are feelings of not coping and it becoming really too difficult to manage, absolutely reach out and get that further support, because that is available and out there for you. It has been an absolute pleasure to run today's session. Before I start to wrap up, is there anything, Joanne, that you would add to this, that you would say to people?
I would say whatever energy you bring into this scenario is the energy you're usually going to get back. So I always suggest to carers to take 5 minutes before this thing is happening. Take 5 minutes just to try to listen to a comforting song, or talk to a friend for a minute, or just say to yourself, like, I know this is going to be hard, but I can do it. Just really kind of hyping yourself up a little bit when you are that tired, because they do react and respond so much to how we are also reacting and responding.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Because self-care is so important. And absolutely, I know we talk about, if you don't look after yourself, it becomes extremely hard to look after somebody else. However, I absolutely acknowledge we don't put ourselves first as carers either. So, my message, I would probably on the back of that say, absolutely put yourself first sometimes, because you do need to look after yourself. Jean, would you have anything to add to that?
Well, again, I'm thinking about what people have said to me, and because they get so agitated, and it could be when really they should be getting ready for bed or something like that, so they won't do that, is get them ready for bed earlier.
Yes.
And so you aren't so tired, because it is so hard getting somebody ready for bed, believe it or not, especially when they're 6'3", and that helps you both then, because when they do calm down and they're ready, they can go to bed. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ladies, thank you so much. It has been such a helpful discussion. Thank you, Joanne, for sharing your expertise with us on this subject. I think, like I say, we could talk about this all day. And Jean, for bringing that perspective, because you are lived it, you have seen it, and you are still daily speaking to carers. So we know that sundowning can be extremely tough, but please do understand that support is out there, and reaching out and asking for help is absolutely key with that. So hopefully some of you can